Okay, good evening. Welcome to Ultimate Project 22. This is another one of our short look through another one of Ultivillage's Elite Team Partnership games that they're doing this year. This is Doublewide versus Sockeye from 2011 Labor Day out in Santa Cruz. This is a great game to learn from. Unfortunately, it's sort of a great game to learn from if you're a club player, a little harder to learn from if you're a new to the game or a college player. But I'm going to try to give you some things to take a look at. I had so much fun with this game today. I've been through it real carefully about 5 times over about 10 hours, and you know, want to show you some things here. Neither team is playing their best, which actually makes it why it's good to learn from this game. The good news is if you're Sockeye, you're playing a lot better than you were at ECC. The bad news is if you're Doublewide, you're not playing as well as you were playing at Colorado Cup. So now I know Sockeye had Doublewide had some injuries, but hopefully they can pull it together. They've got 2 months to nationals, so there's plenty of time. What I want to do is run through the stats. I want to give some things for younger high school, college, younger club players to take a look at in this game. I want to give some things for higher up level players to learn from in this game, and then I want to give some things that I would go through very specifically if I was Sockeye or Doublewide. So let's get going. First, the stats. I'm going to break the stats down first half, second half, because there's a huge difference. In the first half, Doublewide 77 passes, 7 turns. Second half, 38 passes, 7 turns. Things really fell apart for Doublewide in the second half, which is too bad because they had the disc on Sockeye's goal line to tie it at 8, and that was sort of the turning point of the game. Sockeye, basically the same in both halves. So Doublewide ends up 115 passes with 14 turns, which is, 87-88%. Sockeye ends up 163 passes, 10 turns, which is, like 92-93%. And Sockeye wins the game 14-9. If you've watched Ultimate Project 21, the finals of Labor Day, Revolver had 5 turns for the whole game. So, as I said, Sockeye's heading in the right direction. They're looking much better in this game than they did at ECC. But they still have a ways to go to get rid of some of these turns. And as I've said all along, the vast majority of these turns are unforced. Looking at what happens after the turns, after Doublewide after Sockeye turns, converted 2 out of 5 when they had a long field, and only 2 out of 5 when they had a medium or short field. So you can see Doublewide is struggling this game. When Sockeye had a long field after Doublewide turns, they converted 4 out of 9, so about half. But what they did really well is when they had a medium and short field, they converted 4 out of 5. So they really took advantage of the gifts that Doublewide gave them. So good for Sockeye. Okay, so for a young player or college players taking a look at this game, let me show you what I would focus on. Okay, so for newer players taking a look at this game, I think the best thing to learn from is watching 3 players who really played well this game. I don't really know any of them personally. I've met Mike Caldwell a couple times, but I don't know these guys. But they seem to be very, very good players. So the first one, number 4, Max Cook from Doublewide. He's one of their handlers. I think he's one of the captains too. Great player. You're going to see him really moving the disc around the field and not trying to do too much. Not trying to do more than what Sockeye is giving him. And he makes very, very few mistakes. And what he does a really great job of is being in position to help out and reset when their offense is stagnant. In particular, he has a great play. If you watch from 10:47 to 10:54, he's being guarded by Tim Garrett from Seattle, who poaches, and then he goes around and gets the disc. And it's really instructive to see how he handles that poach. Unfortunately, he follows that up with his only really bad play of the game, which was a really poor Huck decision by him. But luckily, his teammates bailed him out. The second guy to watch is number 1 on Sockeye, Tim Garrett. He's the Callahan winner, so one of the best players in college. I want to say 2006, and then he's been playing for Seattle for 4 or 5 years at least since then. Great player. Again, like Max Cook, you will see him not trying to do too much. He's moving the disc around. He has one beautiful hammer, which, don't try that at home, the 60-yard crossfield hammer for a goal. But most of the time, he's just moving the disc around and doing a great job for Sockeye. The one time in this game, and this I'm sort of pointing out where they screw up a little bit, just so you can see it and see how how rare it is for these guys. And B, just even the top players sometimes make mistakes. At 9:54, he tries to get more out of a situation than is there, and makes a straight up the field cut up the line for Alex Nord, and it's just a little bit unnecessary. He spends the whole rest of the game just being very patient, taking what Doublewide's giving him, and this is a little, to me, out of character. And you can see what happens. It's a turn when they probably had an easy goal. And the last one, number 20, Mike Caldwell on Sockeye. He's the guy with the mohawk. Another great player, great downfield cutter. He has 4 or 5 downfield cuts this game, if you're just watching him, where he doesn't get the disc, but he very well set up on the opposite side of the field, downfield cuts. The one thing where I would like to see him improve, and I think he could do a little bit better, at 18:55 and at 26:20, you'll see him trying to throw through the mark. And, there's a lot of foul calls as he's trying to go through the mark. But this is really disruptive to his own team, and I don't think it has a lot of upside for him, just getting the disc 5 yards up the field through the mark. I'd rather have him, in those situations, doing what Max Cook and Tim Garrett are doing, just taking what the O's giving him, and if he can sort of settle that little bit of his game down, where he's trying to force things through the mark, he's going to be unstoppable at nationals. So all 3 of these guys are great players, and if you're a young player looking to learn, it's hard to imagine that there's 3 guys better to learn from than these 3. Okay, so now let's. I want to talk a little bit about the hucks in this game, and then I'll get to some specific Sockeye double-wide stuff. All right, so let's take a look at the huck stats. Sockeye, it's kind of a weird game because there's a handful of hucks that get called back on fouls, and a handful of hucks that get deflected and end up getting caught. So the stats are a little strange. Sockeye has 7 hucks, not counting the ones that got called back, 6 of which are complete. Doublewide is 6 out of 11. For each team, when I go through this game, I think 3 or 4 of these 7 and 3 or 4 of these 11 are good choices. Doublewide put on a clinic in the finals of Colorado Cup, if you go watch that game. That's one of the best hucking games you'll ever see, and they're throwing the disc beautifully out to space. Here they're just out of sync. The receivers are too deep, or the hucks don't get deep enough. Some of them, the 6 catches, some of them are okay, but most of these are not that good. I think Doublewide's not going to be happy when they go through the long passes here. Sockeye, on the other hand, dramatic improvement from ECC, where they had a game against Ironside where they only completed about a third or 25, maybe I can't remember, a third or 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 other hucks. So Sockeye in the last 6 weeks has calmed down their offense a little bit and is making better choices. But they still have to improve here and get it to 6 out of 7 with 7 good choices. And I want to talk about 4 of the Sockeye hucks in particular, because I think there's a really, really great lesson here. So let me draw something up. All right, so Sockeye has 4 hucks here at 222, 423, 437, and 1606. They all have the same problem. Now, a couple of these get called back on fouls, but it's still very instructive. You have the basic situation of the thrower with the disc near the sideline and a cutter running deep. And in all these situations, the initial cut and the decision to throw might be okay, but but the execution is really, really poor. So what happens is the thrower ends up throwing the disc towards where the receiver is now instead of where they're going to end up. So ideally you'd want to put the disc down here with the throw doing something like that. Instead what happens is the thrower starts the disc out in the direction of where the thrower or where the receiver is right now, and what ends up happening is the disc goes sailing over this way and the cutter has to go over and try to chase it down. So it takes an easy situation where if you had just had a nice easy throw out to space, this is probably going to be complete almost every single time. And it creates a very difficult situation where, in fact, none of these are complete. I think. Well, if they're not, I think they're all incomplete. But this is a very common mistake that throwers make. They see where the receiver is and they throw the disc right where the receiver is then, instead of throwing it out to space. Now, this is something I think Sockeye is going to have to spend some time working on in practice, because it's a fairly consistent mistake that they're making in this game, and it doesn't seem to always be the same thrower or anything like that. They need to work on getting the disc out to where the receiver is going to be instead of where the receiver is now. And I think that's a very, very important lesson, really for anyone at any level. But at the high level, these little mistakes are the difference between winning and losing games when teams are having very, very few turnovers. So take a look at these 4 hucks, see where that disc goes, and just ask yourself, if the thrower would have instead thrown it just out to space in front of the receiver, it should have been fine. And if you want to see, as I said before, if you want to see a great, great hucking game, go back to the Doublewide truck stop game from the finals of Colorado Cup, because Doublewide puts on a clinic there. Okay, so the last thing, I just want to mention some stuff that I would work on specifically, or look at specifically if I was Sockeye or Doublewide. Okay, for Doublewide, as I said, they're not really in sync this game, and so there's a lot of stuff that's probably worth taking a look at. I picked out 3 things here. In the beginning of the game, I think this is the second or third point, from 153 to 220, and then from 238 to 349. I'd want to take a real hard look at this and just, those totally out of sync here. And so I think they need to sit down and ask themselves, what are we trying to do on it? What's our offense? What's our philosophy? What's on the film here, obviously, is not their philosophy. It's just they're out of sync. And they need to say, how do we correct it? When we look like this, when we get a little bit out of sync, what are the principles that we're trying to follow on O, and how do we get back to them? From 6:09 to 7 minutes on the tape, they're on the end zone and really struggling. In the very first game I reviewed, which I think was Doublewide Johnny Bravo from Colorado Cup, Doublewide was lethal when they got near the end zone. They had like 5 or 6 short turns from Johnny Bravo and scored on 1 or 2 passes every time. They were really, really good. Here they're right near the end zone and just awful. And so again, same question when they sit down and watch this. They got to ask themselves, what are we trying to do in the end zone? What are the principles we're trying to follow? And when we look like this, how do we get back to looking like we looked against Johnny Bravo? And then 18:05. This is the turn that changes the whole game. They have the disc on the goal line to tie it at 8, and there's just a simple drop on a swing pass. And this gets back to something I've talked about with Doublewide, is just keeping focused on the field. They got to look at this, because it's fine, I guess, when that lack of focus comes back to bite you in a pool play game at Labor Day. But if something like this happens at Nationals, you're really going to be upset with yourselves. So, what about for Sockeye? Okay, and here's the last point I want to make. Some stuff to work on if you're Sockeye, or stuff to watch if you're interested about Sockeye. 538 to 609 and 2059 to 2138. This is just really bad offense from Sockeye. And I think they have to do the same thing that I was saying with Doublewide. They have to look at these clips here and just ask themselves, what are we trying to do on O, and why was it breaking down here? Because this this is really bad. There's a couple other bad points, but the points are made here. And they just have to say, how do we get back on the same page here? 1240 to 1251 and 1818 to 1916, these are after double-wide turnovers where someone just sort of inexplicably picks up the disc immediately and they have nothing going on, no one to throw to, and it just starts off confusion. And so it's just very rushed for no reason. It wasn't like someone's cutting deep and wide open or anything like that. So I think Sockeye needs to also sit down and say, how do we want to approach our O after a turnover? I don't see any reason in these two situations to be picking up the disc really quick, but I think they need to get, as a team, kind of on the same page what they want to do after turns. I mean, if the disc is in the field there, you have 10 seconds to do it, and you don't need to be picking it up after 1 second. You might want to let your O set a little bit. And then 2238 to 2249, this is after Sockeye calls a timeout, and you just have to do better after a timeout. It's like timeout, the first pass is a dump, and then it swings across the field, and there's a really bad turn. Actually, the Max Cook gets a block, actually a nice block, one of the guys I said to watch. And, you know, so this is just stuff to tweak for Sockeye. But, you know, hopefully by regionals, and they are going to have a real hard regionals, because the Northwest apparently only has 2 bids this year. This is just some stuff for them to take a look at. But this is a really great game, and a great game to learn from on a lot of different levels. So hopefully my little Cliff Note summary is helpful. And thanks again to Ultivillage and Patagonia and Discraft for putting these films together, because I think what they're doing is great, and it's going to be great to help lots of people learn how to play better. Thanks for watching.